Hi everyone, today I thought I would jump on and show you a really quick easy technique to make faux vellum. So this is not my idea, I've been doing it for years, however I'm sure that there's a lot who've been doing it for years. I've seen quite a few videos on it, people using all different sorts of mediums to achieve this. So I thought I would just pop on and show you how I do it, because I need to make some vellum. So here in Australia where I am, normally I purchase my vellum at places like Officeworks, which is a stationery store, or Spotlight, which is one of our larger craft stores. It's fairly reasonably priced, I guess. We can get it online like everybody else on Amazon and places like that. And yeah, so I guess printed vellum is a little bit harder to come by. Not necessarily if you just want anything, but I find that specific sorts of prints, maybe what's your style, can be really quite hard to come by. Well, I know it is for me. Like even our little cheapy stores have some packs of printed vellum in, I think it's a 12 by 12, and they're very pretty, but they're just not my style. So it can be a little frustrating. So I do buy vellum and print it on my printer. I have a HP Smart Tank, and which is really good, and I don't tend to get any smudging, although I know some people do. I think I have once had a slight bit of smudging, so there's always a risk of that if you are trying to print onto your vellum. So this I find is an easier way just to print it out, whatever print that you want, and then you don't have to worry about any of that. So I'll show you how I do it. I just use baby oil. So the baby oil that I'm using is just a Johnson & Johnson's baby oil, and I think this 500ml bottle cost me about $7-8. So pretty cheap, it'll last forever. So all I do is I just make sure that, I'll just move those out of the road. I just make sure that I put down some paper towel. I'm on a glass mat, so that's easily cleaned off. Still getting used to this glass mat. I love it. It's a Tim Holtz Tonic Studios glass media mat, and I do love it, but I find if you're filming, it can be quite noisy. I have a tendency to put things down quite heavily, or just drop things like, you know, pins and paper clips and stamps and tweezers and things like that, and I just don't think about the fact that it's going to make such a noise when it lands on the mat. So but it is great for its intended purpose, and I do really like using it for a lot of mixed media sorts of things. So as I said, I just put down some paper towel, and I'll show you basically one that I've done, and you can see it really is quite transparent, and I'll put it against one of my actual pieces of vellum that I bought as vellum and then printed on a little bit later, so you can sort of see the difference. However, here is the same print and then the vellum, so you can see how transparent it actually does become using this. So it is fantastic. This is just on regular cheap copy paper. I think it's about 80 GSM. I have done it on thicker stuff, and I will do some thicker stuff in a moment as well. These, by the way, if you're interested, this print is actually a sterling ink print, so by the gorgeous Catherine. Yeah, gorgeous. These are her free printables that she does very generously, and yeah, her monthly dashboards for 2023 these were. So absolutely gorgeous. And as I said, it just comes out really, really well. So I'll show you exactly how I do it. It's really nice and easy. I'm just going to do it on this tea dyed piece of A4. This print, by the way, I believe is from Amanda at Scrimping Mummy, and I'm pretty sure it's one of her prints, and it's gorgeous. So I just use makeup pads. You can use cotton ball, whatever you want, and I just put sort of a generous amount on there. And what I do, this paper I printed weeks ago, so I'm very confident that it's dry. I have done stuff within 30 seconds of it coming off the printer with no problem. But I would recommend that you just give it a few minutes to dry. The other thing is, especially if you're doing it, fairly soon after printing, just be careful. Try not to, do this as I've just done. But as I said, this has been dry for weeks. So I would recommend that you dab at your page, and then you won't risk smudging any of that ink. And that's all I do, is I just keep dabbing everywhere. I am going to, probably needed to add some more oil to that. So because I did do this weeks ago, I am actually going to do it this way so that it's a little bit quicker. You can also just go around in circles as well. Just pay attention to your edges of your paper, because I think that is something that we often can miss. I'm actually not putting a lot of oil on my makeup pad either, so don't think that you need to keep adding. I'm just being a bit excessive. So I have actually just put some, a decent amount on the makeup pad in the past and gone over the entire thing, and it's worked just fine. So and try not to rub too hard either. I think you just want to be careful with your paper that you don't tear it, or especially since this is only thin copy paper, or that you don't put creases in it. So just light sort of circular motions, just with a as I said, a light pressure. And yeah, just as I said before, this is I certainly didn't come up with this idea. I don't know who did. I don't know that, too many people could claim that it was their idea. I think it's one of those things out in the craft world where somebody invented it one day. How they came up with it, what made them think of this, I don't know, but it's brilliant. But yeah, I think, there's probably somebody many, many, many years ago that came up with this. So I just turn it over, and when I do, I can usually see where I haven't gone, heavy enough with the oil. So I just go over those areas, make sure that I've got them. As I said, you can, if you're not careful, you can actually put lines and creases and things like that in your paper. So I go over the areas where I can see that I've missed, and then I tend to just go over the whole thing. I will say, when I say don't be too heavy-handed, because it does have to dry out. So obviously the more oil that you put on, the longer it's going to take to sort of dry. So I would just put a generous amount on to start with, go from there, and see how well that you can get it covered. Obviously on the back, that side wasn't printed, so you don't have the worry that you do with the other side of smudging any of the ink. So on the back you can, quite safely run it over like this or do swirls or whatever. So you can see some creases that I put in because I was a little bit too wild with it there. So, but you can see that it is transparent. And if I grab something and pop it underneath, you can see how transparent that's become. And it's given this piece of paper just a completely different look. And I don't know about anybody else when they do this, but you know, with this cheaper copy of paper, it's fine. I use it in my planners and things like that for, you know, just about everything. I don't tend to use heavier stuff. That's just because I just don't feel that there's really a need to. I do for dashboards and things like that. But it isn't the thickest. But I always find that once I've put baby oil on it, it does feel thicker, you know, that it started out. So I just think that's a bit of a bonus, really. But it's given this piece of tea-dyed paper a completely different look. And then all I do, you can use tissue paper, but if you use tissue paper, make sure that you use one that's not... trying to think of the word, infused with anything. So I use aloe vera tissues in my household, so I wouldn't use them because, you know, they've got a coating on them. So just use plain tissues, or what I do is I just use some more paper towel. And then all I do is just go over the top just to get any excess off. My fingers don't feel overly greasy, so it's probably really good for my hands, actually, this baby oil. And we know that it's not harmful because it's put on babies, so it shouldn't be any issues long term to your paper in your diaries either. I do know that when some people use things, other sorts of oils and things like that, sometimes there's a bit of a worry over time of those sorts of vegetable oil type things. I've heard people saying about them, you know, going off or whatever. I don't know if that's true. If you've used vegetable oil and you've had it in your, you know, your journals and that for years or and other things, let me know. I'm not too worried about it. I've used it myself. I just really like the baby oil. So as said, I just wipe over it, get any excess off, and as I mentioned before, if you don't use, you know, go too crazy with your oil, you shouldn't have too much excess left over. And it's beautiful. It feels really, really nice. And it feels and looks just like vellum. So that's one piece there that I've done. And like I said, that's just on, I think it's about 80 GSM. So that's come up really, really well. That's what these were done on, just 80 GSM. I did these a few days ago, and now that they've really sort of dried, they're even nicer. So one thing I will say is the thinner the paper, I think the longer it'll take to dry. I made the mistake of putting some of these into my planner the same day that I did them. Actually, it was probably within the hour. And it did leave little oil splotches on my other dashboards and things like that. It didn't ruin them. And they've actually dried out and you can hardly notice. But I would say that you are going to need to leave them. I would actually leave them for probably, you know, at least 24 hours before you put something in. And then maybe if you're not sure, I mean, this technique absolutely works and it's not going to do it long term. But I would say, you know, if you want to put them straight into your diary, or your planners or whatever, maybe just put a piece of paper or something either side, or a few pieces, just to, you know, absorb any of that. And especially if you're going to close the pages, I think that might be a bit of a mistake to not let it properly dry out. And what I tend to do is I will cut my paper, punch my holes if it's going to have holes in it. I do all of that before I do this, just so that it's ready to go. So that's the 80 GSM one. And I don't know if you can really tell, but it's actually really beautiful. So now what I'll do is I'm going to try on the next, well, not try, I've done it before, but I'm just going to show you. This is actually a 120 GSM. Now, I don't know whose print this is, so my apologies. I cannot remember where I got it from. If I do, I'll link it below, but I don't think I remember. So this one will just, again, I use the same, and this has been printed for weeks as well, so I'm not too worried about, you know, any ink smudges or anything like that. So I think I'm pretty confident in just doing my circle motion on this one, being that it's been done. And I mean, I think even if, you know, you printed weeks ago or days ago or whatever, you still need to be gentle with your paper. You know, like I said before, you can tear it, you can put creases in it, which is the last thing you want, especially in vellum. But you know, it is paper and you're making it wet. So there is always a chance that you are going to remove some of the print if you're really rough with it. I mean, I've seen some people do it really, really rough. And, you know, you can see the ink on the sides. So just do it carefully, and I tend to these days use as little oil as possible, purely because I like it to dry quicker. And yeah, but I think that the thicker the paper, the less dry time it tends to need. And I'm sure that depending on the quality of the paper as well, maybe that makes a difference. I'm not sure. So yeah, let me know if you do this as well. I think, you know, it's one of those things, sometimes, you know, you need some vellum, you've run out of vellum, you really want some to do a project. This is just a fun, easy way to do it at home. So then I just flip it over and I can see where I've missed, which is quite easy sometimes depending on the print. Especially this one, it's quite a dark sort of print. Excuse me. So I just turn it over and I just hit those areas with it. You know, I haven't put any more oil on. I'm just using what I have. And it's really interesting to see the difference in the transparency between the different paper weights as well, to see whether you know, get a better outcome. And I think too, depending on what you're using it for, you know, like, you may not necessarily need it to be like super, super transparent. You may like the way that it comes out just with, you know, being not as transparent as some of the other ones that you've done. And I guess in junk journaling too, it's all about individuality. It's all about, you know, things not being perfect and, you know, things being different. So, okay, so let's have a look at this one. And you can see it has worked. It is transparent. Let's use this little calendar here. dashboard to see. So you can, it is transparent, you can see through it. Obviously this print is a lot busier than the last one that we did, so it's not going to be as apparent, especially on camera, but I can see here that I can quite clearly see through that. And this is really good too if you want to make pockets and you don't want you know, you want that semi-transparent pocket in your journal or whatever. And I'll be doing some of those in my junk journal soon, using these as maybe not necessarily this exact paper, but similar. So yeah, it's fantastic. It's turned out, and it just gives, and again, that feels thicker than it started off with, but it just gives them this beautiful look. So I'm really happy with that. Lastly, what I'm going to do is, this is 160 GSM, and I'm just interested with this particular print to see how well this one turns out. So let's give it a go. And again, this one I printed probably 2 months ago, so I have no worry about the ink smudging. However, as I said, you know, there's always a chance. It's like when you use an eraser to rub something out and you're too heavy-handed, you can wreck the medium that you're writing on. So just be careful when you do it. It only needs soft sort of, or firm sort of circles, or as I said before, dab at it, which works really, really well. So whatever works for you. Now, I have seen people use eyedroppers and things like that and drop oil on and all of that sort of thing. I'm not really a fan of doing it that way. I think you can sort of get pools. I mean, I know you're probably going to rub it just about straight away, but I just sort of think I don't like the idea of the potential unevenness of the oil in the paper, but I could be wrong. But I just find that this is really effective to do it this way. And you can see, obviously, this 160 GSM, so it hasn't soaked through as easily as it has on the 80 GSM. So it will probably take a little bit more oil. You'll have to excuse my little dog. She's on border patrol. So it's that time of day. And she's also very naughty when it comes to that sort of thing. And that other dog that you can hear, that big, that's actually my neighbour's dog. So I will apologise, even though I can't do anything about it. I think the poor thing gets very bored and doesn't get much attention. So yeah, with this thicker paper, obviously need a bit more oil, pay a bit more attention, takes a little bit more time. But it's such a quick way of doing stuff. And you know, I mean, if you're somebody that likes to tea and or coffee dye your papers, like I do, you know, this is just another form of, you know, playing with paper and stuff. And you know, making things a little bit different, and all part of the artistic process, I guess. Okay, so we're almost done with that. Now this is a coffee dye piece of paper. Again, I'm pretty sure this is Scrimpy Mummy, Amanda at Scrimpy Mummy, who does beautiful things. I have a few sets of her coffee and tea dye papers with doilies and without, and I just printed this out in black and white. I'm a huge sepia fan, but I'm a huge black and white fan as well. I tend to really like vintagey sort of colours and grungy sort of stuff, and neutral tones, and very wintry things, autumn sort of tones, I guess, so your browns and things like that. So I was just really interested. I'm going to be doing an ink journal, and it's sort of hard to explain. So inks, writing, lots of old-fashioned office type equipment like typewriters and inkwells and things like that is sort of the theme of it. And probably be doing a few different ones. So I just really wanted to print this out in black and white and just see how it came off the printer, and I really, really love it, actually. And now that I've done this, I think I love it even more. So this is made, well, I believe this has made this even thicker. But it's still, you know, bendable and would be good. So it is transparent. It's obviously no way near as transparent as the 80 GSM. But let's put something underneath and see. Don't know how well the camera's actually picking that up, but it is very transparent. And as said before, it also depends on the print that you have on the paper. So if you were to do this just with a plain piece of, you know, whether it be 160, 120, 80 GSM paper with no print on it, it's going to be very, very translucent. But you know, when you've got, depending on the print that you've got on it, you know, you're not going to be able to see as well, or you'll see better through certain parts more than others. But that's the beauty of it. So again, and as I said, I find that the thicker the paper, the quicker it dries. So I will leave my papers to dry for probably a good 24 hours before I use them. And I guess when I'm planning journals or projects or anything like that, I tend to have a few days where I'm sort of planning out what I'm going to do, unless I'm sort of just going totally off the cuff and whatever. But so, you know, doing this, leaving them for a day or so just to dry and stuff like that, you know, it doesn't worry me. But I definitely, with the thinner 80 GSM or so, I would definitely leave that for 24, 48 hours or whatever, and let it dry out really well. So I don't think I wiped this one over, so I'm just going to give it a quick wipe over. And then I'm going to show you another one that I did and how beautiful it turned out. Just give that a bit of a wipe. And as I said before, this glass mat is brilliant for this sort of thing, because then you can just come along, because it is going to leave a light film on the glass. So then you can just come along with your spray and wipe or whatever, and, you know, give it a bit of a clean off, and it's done. So the other item that I did, the other one that I did was, I have this gorgeous echo print and it's by Christine at Sparkbird Studios. So if you haven't checked out her channel, make sure you do. Jump over there, check it out. She's absolutely fantastic. And so this was an echo print that she did, and I've printed this out on 120 GSM because I wanted to use it in a journal. I haven't printed anything on the back of this, but I will be printing just probably a parchment type print or something like that on there. So I printed that out and it will go into one of mine. And then I thought, well, what I wanted to do was I like it so much that I would like it in my journal a couple of times, but I don't like to have the same things. So I thought, well, how about I try to turn it into some vellum, and then whilst it's the same print, it's in a different form, and I can put it in a different signature. So I did that, and this is how beautifully it turned out. And it's gorgeous. You can see it's quite transparent. And you can see the difference between the two of them. I don't know how well the camera will turn out, show the difference between the two of them. But in person, it's, you know, it's a very noticeable difference. And it's gorgeous. So, you know, I can have this in one part, or I can use bits of this for pockets. You know, all sorts of different things. So that one turned out beautifully. Some others that I did was, this was actually a bit of a misprint. I did this one on, again, cheap copy paper, and the reason why I say it was a bit of a misprint is because when I printed it out, the actual, it hadn't smudged as such, but for some reason, and this was on my old printer, so I've had it sitting here for months, it had these little lines sort of on them that were really quite faint, and I just sort of threw the piece of paper into my scraps bin and sort of left it sitting there. And I pulled it out a couple of days ago, and I thought, well, I'm going to give it a go with this and just see how it comes up. And also the black was a little bit dull. So that's the other reason why I decided not to use it. Anyway, when I did it with the baby oil, not only has it brought all the black up to be really vibrant, but you can't notice any of those little lines in the print. And again, it's worked beautifully, and it looks just like the vellums that I've bought. So the other thing that I did, and now I'm trying to remember where these were from, and I think they might be the Junk Journal Studio. I could be wrong, and if I am, I'm really sorry. But these were a page of ephemera, and again I did it on 80 GSM. There was a whole heap of them, rectangles, circles, all sorts of things, and I printed them out, and I thought I'm gonna have a go at doing them. So I did, and look how beautiful they've turned out, and they're really transparent. So when you, let's see what I can put it over and see if that makes a difference. So you can see how transparent they've turned out. And, you know, I thought, how lovely would they be as pockets, or as just little, you know, pieces over the top of a tag, or, you know, you can just use them as ephemera and stick them down or pop them in things or whatever. Maybe do it on something a bit thicker if you're going to use it as a tag, or you can make it as a pocket on a tag. I just thought they were gorgeous and thought I would give them a go. And the baby oil, the vibrancy was already great in this print, but it's just made it pop. So yeah, I think it's turned out really, really well. So I will just remind you, make sure you do, you know, give it time to dry, especially the thinner stuff. So we'll just show you. I'm going to close up my baby oil because I'm a messy crafter and have a tendency to knock things over. So in my planner, so this is not my typical everyday carry, but it is my more information planner. So it has all my medical information, all of my you know, like logins, my shopping lists, my medication lists, all of that sort of stuff, you know, all the information for all your bills and things like that, my wish lists, my shopping lists, my to-do lists, all of that sort of stuff sort of sits in here, and pen swatching and things like that, apart from, you know, I've got a journal for my fountain pen swatching, but just my general inks like my zebra sarasses and things like that, I do swatches in here. I have a tendency to forget what I have when I get to a store, like in a certain shade, so I like to have that stuff. So it's not my everyday carry planner as such. This is more my information hub. So this is actually a piece of vellum that I bought and then printed on. And if I compare the two of these, there's really not much difference between them. So there, maybe the bought vellum is a little bit more transparent, but there's not much in it. So that printed out really well on there. This is another print that I did. And if you were to look really closely on this one, you would see, again, this is my old printer. There's really, really fine lines all the way through it. I'm sure if I hit it with some baby oil, that'd probably all go away, but it's a bit of overkill. So another one that I bought and then printed on. See if I've got a piece of paper I can just slide underneath there. So, and that one turned out really, really nice. So, but again, I think that, you know, the bought and the made vellum, there's not a great deal of difference between it. So, another one that I did. So yeah, again, sorry about my dog. So yeah, so that's it. Just thought I would run over those with you and show you how I do it. So if you haven't tried it before, go do it. It's lots of fun. If you haven't seen it, if you're fairly new to crafting and you're not aware of it, now you are, or you may have seen it 1,000 times. Either way, it's been fun and I'll see you next time.